Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. I'm your host, Sara Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of three. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you're notified every week with my new podcast on Mondays and Tuesdays. And if you haven't already, join my free group coaching on Telegram with the link below. There's no downside. I teach you on a daily basis with tips and tools to enhance your health, and you will be a part of an amazing like-minded group to support you on your journey in addition to truly taking control of your health. My goal is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. So help me with that goal. Share this podcast with a few of your friends who may need my help, especially this one. We're going to be talking about something that might be that hidden key to what's going on in your body. And you've been going to the doctor and getting no answers. So we have Dr. Nathan Bryan on the show. He has earned his undergraduate Bachelor of Science degree in biochemistry from the University of Texas at Austin, and his doctoral degree from Louisiana State University School of Medicine. He has so much more education after that, and I want him to talk through it because it's so impressive. And he has been involved in the research of nitric oxide for the past 20 years and has made many discoveries in the field that have actually resulted in U.S. and international patents and product technology resulting from its discoveries and inventions. And I'm super excited to learn more about it and also carry them at Accelerated Health Products. Welcome, Dr. Bryan. How are you today?
Great, Sarah. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
I love this topic because it's almost like everyone's jumping at different causes for these symptoms. And it's this one molecule that's hard to measure because it's here and gone in a flash, which I want to get into. And there's so much that it does in the body. So let's dive into it. What have you learned over the last 20 years? What got you into your fascination over this molecule, nitric oxide? And what have you discovered?
Well, thanks. It's a great intro, and it's a fascinating molecule, and we've actually learned quite a bit over the past 20 years. But as you mentioned, nitric oxide is a gas that's naturally produced in the body, and once it's produced, it's gone in less than a second. But during that second, it activates a number of cell signaling pathways and controls and regulates really important things like blood pressure, circulation, oxygen delivery. It regulates our immune system and how well we kill off invading pathogens, and it's extremely important for brain health. But, I got into this field back, I guess, almost 25 years ago, right after the Nobel Prize was awarded for the discovery of nitric oxide. So we knew it was a very important molecule, but there were a lot of things we didn't know, like how the human body produces nitric oxide, what goes wrong in people that can't make it, what are the clinical consequences, how they present clinically if they become nitric oxide deficient, and then perhaps most importantly is how do we fix or restore nitric oxide production in patients, in humans. And so I'm happy to report we have the answers to all four of those now, and we've solved a lot of medical mysteries. And so I think your intro was very appropriate because I see all the time people who've been going to the doctor for 10, 20, 30 years and not getting better, and simply by understanding this single molecule nitric oxide, it seems to be foundational for optimal health.
Well, it affects blood pressure and circulation, and that's almost everything, right? And in a world today, post-pandemic, the spike protein, the processed foods, the GMOs, the glyphosate, the EMFs, the toxins, all of these things are piling up on us. They're backing up our livers. They're creating just havoc in the body. And all of those things are diminishing the nitric oxide. Am I correct?
No, you're spot on. Look, as you mentioned, we're hit with an infinite number of insults every day, from herbicides and pesticides, EMF, spike protein from the COVID virus, or even those that chose to take the mRNA shot. But all of this, the body responds with a finite number of responses to these infinite number of insults. And it's always inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction. And that explains the etiology of most, if not all, age-related chronic disease. And so it's nitric oxide that controls and regulates all of those. So without nitric oxide, you get decreased blood flow and circulation to that organ. You get inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction. And those are the hallmarks of every single chronic disease. So what we're finding is if you can restore nitric oxide or give the body nitric oxide, you improve blood flow, you improve oxygenation, you downregulate the adhesion molecules in the lining of the blood vessels. So you downregulate the A6 receptors, which is what the spike protein actually binds to. And then you decrease the inflammation that causes a lot of the havoc and on the vascular system and on end organ disease. So nitric oxide is foundational for everything we know about, everything that shuts down nitric oxide production.
So as you mentioned, it's a gas. How do you measure it? How do you figure out if you have too much, too little? And because how do you capture it? Can you take a blood test? How do you measure it?
That's been the challenge clinically for nitric oxide. And I think that's one of the reasons that it's not, pervasive in clinical medicine, and most people know about it, because how do you know? It's not like your cholesterol or vitamin D levels where you can pull blood and get a number, because nitric oxide, once it's produced, it's gone in less than a second. Now, in the research laboratory where I spent 20 years of my career, we could measure these different nitric oxide metabolites in patient samples, whether it's blood or saliva or, tissue biopsies, but it's not used clinically. So really what we have to rely on are symptoms. So if you're nitric oxide deficient, what symptoms develop? Well, the first one develop is sexual dysfunction, because if you can't dilate the blood vessels of the sex organs, you can't get engorgement, and you develop erectile dysfunction. That occurs in both men and women. The other symptom is an elevation in blood pressure. 2 out of 3 Americans have an unsafe elevation in blood pressure. And that's the number one risk factor for the number one killer of men and women worldwide, which is cardiovascular disease. And then when you develop, memory problems and mild cognitive disorders, that's a sign of nitric oxide deficiency. If you're prone to infections, if you get the flu every year, if you're susceptible to the COVID virus or bacterial infections, it tells us your body's nitric oxide deficient. Or if you can't maintain an exercise regimen, if you get winded walking down the hall or walking up a flight of steps, then your body's not making enough nitric oxide.
My mind is going in 1,000 different directions. Insulin resistance. So the people that are prone to get the flu or get disease or the virus, they have the metabolic disease, right? The comorbidities, insulin resistance. In my eyes, is that and toxicity are the two causes for most disease, right? So
absolutely.
Where does nitric oxide fit into insulin resistance?
Well, in 2009, we were the first group to report that nitric oxide is part of the insulin signaling. And now we understand that to be the case because once insulin is secreted from the pancreas, right, it binds to insulin receptors on most cells, mainly muscle cells, fat cells, and even liver cells. And then that insulin tells the cell to take up glucose, clear it from the circulation. Well, the terminal step in that process is a protein called GLUT4. It's cytosolic, and then when it goes to the membrane, it binds glucose. Well, the signal for GLUT4 to translocate is nitric oxide. So if the cell is unable to produce nitric oxide, you develop insulin resistance. So you get more insulin secreted, but yet GLUT4 doesn't get the signal. And that's the fundamental basis for insulin resistance, is nitric oxide deficiency. So now when we restore the cell's ability to produce nitric oxide, you can potentiate insulin signaling, you get GLUT4 translocation, you clear glucose from the circulation, and then it tells the pancreas, stop secreting insulin, and so you normalize the entire metabolic response. But without nitric oxide, you get hyperglycemia, then you get the hyperinsulinemia, which is the inflammatory component of diabetes, and it's all because the cell can't make nitric oxide. So if we fix the cell's ability to make nitric oxide, we improve insulin signaling and overcome most metabolic disease.
So over the last 3 years, what I've noticed with the spike protein affecting the ACE2 receptor, in the liver is that people are having hypoglycemia or hypoinsulinemia and over-exaggerated insulin responses. And would this be related to a depletion of nitric oxide?
Well, here's what we know in terms of, there's two components to this, right? There's a vascular component and the upregulation of the adhesion molecules, including the ACE receptor. And it's nitric oxide that downregulates that. So if there's less adhesion molecules expressed, there's less monocytes and neutrophils sticking to the lining of the blood vessel. It also downregulates the ACE2 receptor, so there's less target for the spike protein to attach to and start the inflammatory cascade. So nitric oxide downregulates all those. So you basically decrease the number of targets that the spike protein can bind to. But in terms of the insulin response, so let me make another very important point. Part of our immune system's ability to shut down virus from replicating is the ability to mobilize an immune response and produce nitric oxide. So when we're exposed to any virus, call it COVID, call it the seasonal flu or RSV or any virus, the body responds with an increased circulation, mobilize an immune response. The immune cells go to the site of attachment. The immune cells produce a lot of nitric oxide, and the nitric oxide actually prevents the virus from replicating. So as long as you got good circulation, a robust immune response, we're exposed to viruses every day. Some people get sick, some people don't. The people who don't get sick from COVID or any virus infection is those that can make nitric oxide, have ample circulation, sufficient nitric oxide. Because if you can't make nitric oxide, the virus replicates, it propagates throughout the body, and those are the people who get sick. And that explained the entire pandemic, the global pandemic of COVID, where the people who got sick and died from COVID were the people who couldn't make nitric oxide. The elderly, those with diabetes, hypertension, previous heart attacks, smokers. All of those patients are nitric oxide deficient, and explained the increased risk and susceptibility to COVID. And it's not just COVID, it's the seasonal flu that we've known about for the past 100 years.
Right. Like I said in the beginning, it's the hidden link that no one's looking at. So, okay, a lot of that was very sciencey and detailed. So if we lost you, come back, because we're going to talk about what are the symptoms to look for of low nitric oxide.
So as we mentioned, we look at hypertension or any increase in blood pressure above 120/80. That's the first sign and symptom of nitric oxide deficiency. Erectile dysfunction. So if you have erectile dysfunction, that means you have vascular dysfunction in the sex organs. But it's not just isolated to your sex organs. It means you have vascular dysfunction in your coronary arteries, in the arteries of your brain, your liver, your lungs. So if you can't produce nitric oxide to vasodilate that particular vascular bed, then you're nitric oxide deficient. So those are the most common, right? 50% of the men over the age of 40 self-report erectile dysfunction. 2 out of 3 Americans have an unsafe elevation in blood pressure. So that's a massive global population right there. If we could just address those two as being signs and symptoms of nitric oxide deficiency, and then start implementing lifestyle strategies, product technology that restores nitric oxide, then that right there will change the whole landscape of healthcare and medicine.
And the few things in the lifestyle that we can change, I want to get through quite a bit here. So we've got the PPIs, which right now I've actually been focused on, because why? We are in the holiday season. Everyone's drinking a little more. They're eating stuff that they normally don't eat, and they've got that acid reflux, and that's keeping them up at night. So let's just pop a little PPIs. And I've got a family member that thinks there's nothing wrong with it to do it long term, and is wondering why the acid reflux isn't correcting itself. So why should we not be taking acid reflux medication or even Tums because of nitric oxide?
Yeah, look, the data are very clear now. Ever since 2015, there's been data that comes out usually every year that reveal that people who have been on proton pump inhibitors, those are the PPIs you referred to, have a 40% higher incidence of heart attack, stroke, and vascular dementia and Alzheimer's. 40% higher incidence. It's not increased risk. It's actual heart attacks, strokes, and Alzheimer's. So, I mean, this goes back to 20 years ago when the COX-2 inhibitors, the Vioxx, the Celebrex, hit the market and causing increased heart attacks and strokes. These drugs are even more dangerous than the COX-2 inhibitors. So they should have a black box warning on them, and you should not take these drugs chronically. In fact, they were never approved by the FDA to be taken chronically, only acutely for acute esophageal reflux disease. So number one, mechanistically, we know that they completely shut down nitric oxide production, and that's causing the increased heart attack, strokes, and Alzheimer's. But let's go back to basic physiology 101. You need stomach acid to break down proteins into amino acids. You can't digest proteins, so you have peptide fragments absorbed across the gut. You develop autoimmune disease, foodborne allergies, if you can't break down proteins into amino acids. We need stomach acid to absorb things like iodine, iron, B vitamins, magnesium, selenium, chromium. So when you're on antacid, you can't absorb basic micronutrients. And the basis of all chronic disease is micronutrient deficiency. Your body is either missing something that it needs or it's exposed to something that it doesn't need. And people who have been on antacids are completely deficient in basic micronutrients. So look, if I wanted to make you chronically ill and dependent upon drugs the rest of your life, first thing I'd do is put you on an antacid. And then I would recommend that you use mouthwash twice a day, get your cholesterol below 200, and now you're chronically ill and you're the best customer that pharmaceutical companies could ever imagine.
Right. One medication after another, and then you've got a cocktail and you wonder why you die early. So I love this whole idea of stomach acid is so misunderstood, because what I've actually found is most people actually need to supplement with HCl for proper digestion. Here we are increasing acid for proper digestion and micronutrients, and you talked about the importance of micronutrients. Well, we're already fighting soils that are completely depleted of our micronutrients.
That's right.
And that are sprayed with glyphosate and all of that. So here we are. We need our stomach acid to be so good at taking all the little nutrients that we're taking in, because we're not even getting what our ancestors used to get, or even our parents, let alone our ancestors. So can you dive a little deeper into that HCl versus the antacids and where people are getting this wrong?
Well, it's a paradox. Reflux disease is caused by the body's inability to produce sufficient hydrochloric acid in the stomach. So it's never made sense to me biochemically and physiologically why you would give an acid suppressor with patient with reflux disease. And this is the body's response, right? So if you can't make stomach acid and you can't break down proteins into amino acids, you get these peptide fragments that your body sees as foreign molecules. And they are foreign. These aren't human proteins. These are muscle proteins from animals, or they're plant proteins. These are foreign molecules that the body has to break down into constituent amino acids, and then we make human proteins from these constituent amino acids. So when your body's exposed to something it doesn't recognize or sees as foreign, it tries to get rid of it, right? And the response is an expectoration, right? We try to expectorate and get rid of this foreign molecule from our stomach, and that's reflux. And so what little bit of acid is actually there causes some burning to the esophagus, and you get diagnosed as esophageal reflux disease. But if you restore stomach acid production, you give the body what it needs so the pyloric cells can make hydrochloric acid, or you just take apple cider vinegar to acidify the lumen of the stomach. Now you can break down proteins into amino acid. You completely resolve the reflux disease, and you can actually break down proteins and amino acids, absorb nutrients, and let the body do what it's designed to do. The other problem with reflux disease and antacids that's completely unrelated to nitric oxide is that controls the total acid-base balance of the body. Because when we need that acid dump from the stomach into the duodenum that tells the pancreas to secrete sodium bicarb, and that's the buffering capacity of every cell in the body. So without the acid dump from the stomach, you don't get bicarb secretion. Patients become chronically acidic, and that sets the stage for cancer. Cancer is low pH, low oxygen, low voltage, and it's all controlled by stomach acid production.
Very interesting. And this is why you do not want to drink alkaline water when you're eating, especially, correct?
No, that's right. Especially if you're taking antacids, drinking alkaline water is probably the worst thing you can do. The concept of alkaline water is to get your body to secrete more stomach acid, because you're providing a base. The stomach is by design supposed to be acidic. So to neutralize the base, you stimulate the stomach to make hydrochloric acid to make the body more acidic, make the stomach more acidic, so you can actually lead to better digestion. But the worst thing you can do is drink alkaline water while you're on an antacid.
Right. So someone's listening and they're on their antacid right now saying, yeah, that all sounds great, but what do I do? Besides the apple cider vinegar, number one, get rid of the processed food, get rid of the alcohol, start paying attention to your diet and not just trying to chase your bad diet with a PPI. Besides that, if they're not getting relief, will hydrochloric acid supplement actually help their acid reflux, or will that irritate it more?
Well, what we do is we have to understand what the body needs to do a particular reaction, right? We understand what the body needs to make nitric oxide. It's also well known what the pyloric cells need to make hydrochloric acid. And so we got to give the body what it needs. And the chemical reaction to make HCl in the pyloric cells is you need iodine. And again, if your body is not making stomach acid, you're not absorbing iodine. Furthermore, the Western diet is completely devoid of any iodine. So almost every American is deficient in iodine. So we need iodine for that reaction. We need sodium chloride. We need B vitamins. We need zinc. And we need sodium or carbon dioxide. And that's the chemical reaction for that. So there's some products out there. So you have to supplement with zinc, iodine, and now the pyloric cells have the substrates and the precursors it needs to make hydrochloric acid. But we have to, it's a process, right? So people who have been on these antacids become dependent upon them because most everybody I talk to has tried to get off. They get rebound hyperchloride secretion, and it exacerbates the reflux disease. So what I tell people is you have to slowly wean off of these drugs. So whatever dose you're taking now, cut that dose in half and take half a dose now for a week. Then after a week, take that half dose every other day for a week. And then after that, you can just stop it. Because if you stop cold turkey, your stomach is going to make rebound hyperchlorhydria, and you're going to exacerbate the condition. And that's why people can't stop these cold turkey. But in the meantime, we've got to acidify the lumen of the stomach. So before every meal, just take a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and that's the process. And then supplement with iodine and these other supplements to give the body what it needs so it can make stomach acid on its own. And that protocol works beautifully. You can actually get people off of antacids and actually allow their body to heal and perform.
You are speaking my language on iodine and nitric oxide, as we went back and forth before, is a redox molecule, and they're produced by the mitochondria. I believe we should be talking about the mitochondrial diet, not the paleo diet or the carnivore or the vegan diet, but the mitochondrial diet, because that is your health. That is your longevity. And when nitric oxide skyrockets with iodine, because the number one reason for mitochondrial failure is iodine deficiency. It's also the number one reason for depression and for low IQ and for breast cancer and a lot of other things. And especially with what's going on with the spike protein, and also the damage done to the DNA, we've seen an alleviation, I have to be careful with how I say this, with the acceleradine iodine, which I'm super excited to send to you for you to try as well. And so there's so much that one mineral does for the body, and increases that ATP by 18 times versus what the body's already experiencing. So I'm a huge fan, obviously, if anyone's been listening to me, is of iodine supplementation. The other one that is so odd, and no one would ever even think that this mouthwash would be an issue with any health, because the people that are doing mouthwash actually care about their hygiene, right? They're the ones that are actually thinking, oh, I don't want to have bad breath and I want to have good oral health. As a mom of 3, I've always teased my kids. I've said, look, 99% of disease is reversible, not your teeth, not your mouth. Yeah. Don't mess up your teeth. So oral hygiene and the oral bacteria and all of that is so important to the body. I know that there's a map of your teeth as it relates to every organ in the body. There's so much about your mouth. But let's talk about mouthwash.
Yeah. Now, look, I think everything typically starts with a reason or a cause, and a good cause. I mean, I think most humans are good and well-intended, and try to do the right thing. But, we call this progress. 100 years ago, they thought that leaching and exsanguinating blood in sick people by leeches was a good idea, and it worked clinically, but now we know better, right? So there's this known connection between oral hygiene and cardiovascular disease, right? The oral systemic link. People with poor oral hygiene have higher incidence of heart attack or stroke. So the dentist approach and the American Dental Association goes, well, let's just kill all the oral bacteria with mouthwash, antiseptic mouthwash. And you see the commercials, kills 99.99% of the bacteria in your mouth. Well, maybe 100 years ago, that was a good idea. But now, since the microbiome has been mapped and we understand that the bacteria that live in and on our body outnumber our own human cells 10 to 1, and these bacteria are there to do specific metabolic functions that contribute to the health of the host, the human. So we eradicate the bacteria to our own demise. There's a reason we don't take an antibiotic every day for the rest of our life, because of the havoc it wreaks on the human host, and it causes systemic disease. Well, the same thing happens when you eradicate the oral bacteria. Bad things happen. We and others published that if you use mouthwash, it causes an increase in blood pressure. You lose the protective benefits of exercise. So mouthwash disrupts the entire ecology of the oral microbiome, shuts down nitric oxide production, and causes chronic disease. And so we have to restore the oral microbiome. And putting a shotgun blast or dropping an atomic bomb on an entire population of bacteria is really a bad idea. So now what we're trying to do is, how do we selectively kill the bad guys while maintaining a healthy, diverse oral microbiome? And that's what we do with our nitric oxide technology.
So what about gum? What about other things when you eat, when you're eating food? What does the nitric oxide do? Does it go down temporarily and then come back up when you're not eating between meals?
The human body, the more I learn about the human body, the more I'm amazed at, what a grand designer we had and how it basically adjusts to all conditions. And there's enormous redundancy in the human body, right? So nitric oxide, there always has to be a way for the human body to produce nitric oxide. So mechanistically, we know how this works through the diet. So when we eat certain foods, primarily green leafy vegetables that are enriched in nitrate, in the body, so when we consume this meal, let's take spinach, for example, 90 minutes after we consume a plate of spinach, the components of that meal are broken down, and we have these constituent molecules. One we focus on is nitrate. That nitrate is taken up in the gut and concentrated in our salivary glands. And this was recognized back in the 1950s, that nitrate from our diet is intentionally concentrated in our salivary glands. And now for the next 6, 8, 10 hours, each time we salivate after we've eaten that meal, we secrete nitrate through the salivary glands, and then the bacteria that live in the crypts of the tongue reduce the nitrate to nitrite. And humans don't have this enzyme. We're 100% dependent upon the bacteria. So now the saliva is enriched in nitrite, and when we swallow our own saliva, as long as there's sufficient stomach acid production, nitrite becomes protonated and we generate nitric oxide gas in the lumen of the stomach. So by eating these plant-based foods, having the right oral bacteria, every time we swallow our saliva, we get a burst in production of nitric oxide in the lumen of the stomach. And that nitric oxide that's produced through swallowing our own saliva kills things like H. pylori, the ulcer-causing bacteria, can kill any E. coli or salmonella or clostridium that may be found in the foods. But more importantly, it enhances gastric mucosal blood flow, so now you can absorb nutrients, take them up, and distribute them throughout the entire body. But when you don't have stomach acid being produced, or when you're using antacids, or you don't eat a good diet, you completely shut down nitric oxide production from this pathway. And the clinical consequences are severe. High blood pressure, erectile dysfunction, exercise intolerance, diabetes, insulin resistance, Alzheimer's, all can be traced back to a lack of nitric oxide production.
Okay, so you spoke of nitrates, nitrites, and nitric oxide. That nitrites. So does this mean we should go out and be eating our salami and our hot dogs with the nitrites in them to get in for those health benefits?
Not necessarily. That's the cured and processed meat industry. What gave the nitrite, the nitrates a bad name and kind of made them, demons in the food supply. So there's not enough nitrite and nitrate in cured and processed meats to lead to any appreciable production of nitric oxide. In fact, 85% of the nitrate and nitrite we get from our diet comes from eating green leafy vegetables. Only 5% comes from cured and processed meats. The other 10% comes from swallowing our own saliva. So nitrite and nitrate, these are the exact same molecules that's used for the meat curing that's found naturally in green leafy vegetables. And so now we've completely debunked this myth that nitrite and nitrate in cured and processed meats is what causes cancer. If that were the case, then vegetarians or people who eat a plant-based diet would have 10 times higher rates of cancer than meat eaters. And we know it's just the opposite. So to answer your question, it's completely safe to eat cured and processed meats like your salami, your bacon, your hams. But you can't get enough nitrite from consuming those foods because there's so little residual nitrite, because it performs the intended chemistry, binds to the iron nitrosyl of myoglobin in the muscle, cures it, prevents Clostridium overgrowth, preserves it's a preservative solution, so it basically enhances the food safety, the shelf life of these ready-to-eat meals. And without it, we would have an epidemic of foodborne illness. So it's absolutely essential for food safety.
I want to go back to the gut. And you mentioned E. coli, salmonella, gut pathogens, H. pylori.
Yep.
This is something that I've struggled with, and it actually was probably the cause of me hitting rock bottom and, catapulting me on my own health journey, is that I wasn't digesting food, so the bad guys would be able to take over the good guys, the E. coli. And it didn't matter if the food actually had E. coli in it. Everyone's got a little E. coli in there, and it's just, can it take over the good guys? So can you dive a little deeper into the relationship of nitric oxide and leaky gut and the gut health and the microbiome?
Yep. So the ecology of the microbiome changes, right, from the mouth and the tongue, the crypts of the tongue, all the way down through the GI tract to the colon and to the anus. The diversity in the communities are completely different. And it's by design, because they have to perform different functions at different segments of the gut. So, but along that, so we need the microbiome to create short-chain fatty acids, for example, in the colon. We need the microbiome to produce nitric oxide in the crypts of the tongue. But also in the digestive tract, so similar to the endothelial cells that line all the blood vessels, there are epithelial cells that line all the, from the nasal sinuses to the gastrointestinal tract. And similar to the enzyme that's found in the endothelial cells, the nitric oxide synthase enzyme is found in the epithelial cells. And we call that endothelial dysfunction or epithelial dysfunction. So when you have epithelial dysfunction, then when you lose the ability to make nitric oxide, you lose the integrity of the barrier function. Same thing happens in the lining of the blood vessel. If you can't make nitric oxide, you lose that barrier function of the endothelial cells. You get extravasation of cholesterol and monocytes and neutrophils, and that starts the inflammation. Well, when you develop epithelial dysfunction and leaky gut, then now these peptide fragments can be absorbed across the gut. You get translocation of the bacteria, and the integrity of the entire gastrointestinal system is compromised. So how do we fix this? Number one, we got to restore the ecology of the microbiome. But I think more importantly, we've got to restore the integrity of the epithelial cells, make sufficient nitric oxide, maintain that junction and that barrier function. So now that you can absorb the nutrients that you need, you can maintain a healthy gut ecology so the bacteria can perform these metabolic functions, short-chain fatty acids, vitamin metabolism, and provide these metabolites to the host. But you have to restore the ecology of it. And here's the beauty of what nitric oxide does. Most pathogenic, opportunistic bacteria are sensitive to nitric oxide. So if you give nitric oxide or you restore the body's ability to make nitric oxide, that shuts down the bacterial respiration. Nitric oxide binds to the iron sulfur centers of the bacteria, that how they respire, shuts down their respiration and kills the bad guys. And the good guys are actually nitrate reducers, so they actually produce nitric oxide. So that maintains the entire ecology of the gut. You just got to maintain a diverse microbiome. The good guys keep the bad guys at bay, and you've got peace and harmony.
Amazing. Okay, so athletic performance. I've got 3 kids. They all were, or 2 of them are still rowing. One of them's not anymore, but very physically active. I try to think of myself as an athlete still. I may not be competing anymore, but anyways, I want to think I am. With that being said, these kids are drinking tons of beet juice. And does that work, number one? But also, what is the nitric oxide doing for physical performance and these high performing athletes? Because the other thing that I do on a weekly basis is the red light bed, which is known to increase nitric oxide. And the place I go to actually has a lot of professional athletes come in for this reason. So can you connect the dots there?
Yeah, I'll address the first one. Most of the beetroot products on the market don't do anything except turn your pee and your poop pink and red and cause a lot of anxiety. The beets have been the hero vegetable for the past really 12 to 15 years. In the 2012 Olympic Games in London, it was revealed that a lot of these athletes were drinking a lot of beetroot juice, and rightfully so, because there were some clinical studies published showing that beetroot juice, if it contains sufficient nitrate, could be producing nitric oxide that would enhance performance. But I've tested almost every beetroot product on the market, and 99% of them don't provide any nitric oxide benefit whatsoever. So, and it's because the companies doing this are just selling you dead beets, right? Or beets in gummies, which obviously do nothing but destroy the microbiome and shut down nitric oxide production. So there has to be a certain amount of nitrate that's required to produce nitric oxide. So all of our products do just that. They produce nitric oxide. The other thing is most people don't like the taste of beets. We created a beetroot product that doesn't look or taste like beets, remove the oxalates, and it's a mixed berry flavor. So what is it doing to performance? It's doing several things mechanistically. Number one, it's improving blood flow and oxygen delivery. So now you're getting more oxygen being delivered to the working skeletal muscle, and you can actually extend the anaerobic threshold. Number two, the adaptive effects involve mitochondria and mitochondrial biogenesis. So nitric oxide induces PGC1 alpha, which induces mitochondrial biogenesis. So the net result in the adaptive effects, if you've got more mitochondria generating more ATP more efficiently with less oxygen. And that's the adaptive effects of nitric oxide on making well-trained athletes even more elite athletes. And the difference really between first and last is the ability to produce nitric oxide, mitochondria to produce energy, extend that anaerobic threshold, and you get mobilization of stem cells, so you get better recovery, less soreness, and you just become a well-trained, well-oiled machine.
I love that you mentioned oxalates, because the first thing that comes to my mind when someone's drinking concentrated beet juice, which is one of the top vegetables full of oxalates. Oxalates cause urogenital issues, brain fog, joint issues. Here we are trying to be an athlete and we're having joint pain because of the oxalates. And so, maybe have a beet in your salad for enjoyment, but let's not overload our system with oxalates. So this brings us to supplementation. What do we do? And the other question is, I'd like you to address, is there anyone that shouldn't supplement with these types of supplements?
Yeah, so I'll take the last question first. Is there anybody that shouldn't take nitric oxide? And it depends. If you're taking a product that actually generates nitric oxide, that recapitulates nitric oxide production in the human body, no. And I tell people there's two populations we're speaking to. There's the people who are sick and tired of being sick and tired, where Western medicine has failed them and they're looking for new solutions to get better. That's one population. The other are people like you and I, Sarah, who are healthy and don't want to get sick. So we have to be proactive instead of reactive. But both of those people can benefit from nitric oxide. I just turned 50 last week, but I have the vascular age of a 30-something. And it's because I'm always optimizing my nitric oxide production. And so I know I'm healthy. I feel better than I have in 20 years, and I don't want to get sick. So I take nitric oxide as a proactive approach, as a prophylactic response. But then there are people who are sick who want to get better, and they certainly need nitric oxide. But as you mentioned, there are tons of products, hundreds of nitric oxide, so-called nitric oxide products on the market, and the majority of them do absolutely nothing. So we have to take nitric oxide. Well, first of all, let me take a step back. My job is to instruct you and inform you on how to produce nitric oxide naturally on your own. Because if we give the body what it needs, the body does its job, right? There's no need for supplementation. But unfortunately, we live in the world where the food we eat is depleted of many nutrients and minerals, so we almost have to supplement. So I tell people you have to do two things. Stop doing the things that disrupt nitric oxide production and start doing the things that promote it. And then we can add on supplements if you need it. But first, if you're using mouthwash, you got to stop. Second, if you use fluoride in your toothpaste, you got to buy a non-fluorinated toothpaste. Fluoride's neurotoxin. It's an antiseptic, and it kills your thyroid function. Number 3, if you're on antacids, you have to stop and wean off antacids. You need stomach acid to make nitric oxide. So if you get rid of mouthwash, fluoride, and acids, now your body can actually produce nitric oxide. But we can enhance that or potentiate it. And how do we do that? Well, moderate physical exercise, 20 to 30 minutes of exercise a day. Throw in some more green leafy vegetables. And then you mentioned it, red light therapy. I have the light bed. I sit in an infrared sauna, or 20 to 30 minutes of just direct sunlight a day can activate and release nitric oxide. So those things right there, number 1, it's cost savings because you're not buying mouthwash anymore. You can buy a non-fluorinated toothpaste, and you get off antacids. And then exercise is cheap, right? We just have to move. And then a balanced diet in moderation. And then when all else fails, or Americans are trained to want to take a pill for something, then we have products and supplements that do it for you. If your body can't make nitric oxide, then my products do it for you. And we fix the reason your body can't make it.
So let's talk about your products. I'd like to learn more about those.
Yep. So we have a line of branded products called N101. It's 1 nitrogen, 1 oxygen. You can find those at n101.com. But I think your audience should recognize that nitric oxide is a gas, right? So the challenge in not just medicine, but in supplements is how do we deliver a bioactive gas in a solid dose form? And I'm the first and only person in the world who's ever developed a solid dose form of nitric oxide gas. So we make an orally disintegrating tablet. You put this lozenge in your mouth, and it dissolves over 5 to 6 minutes. And as that lozenge is dissolving, it's liberating nitric oxide gas. We can detect it with an analyzer. We can see the effect, so we can do an ultrasound of the carotid. We can see your blood vessels dilate within 10 to 15 seconds. And then we restore the oral microbiome. Because that lozenge has a resident time of 5 to 6 minutes, it kills the bad bacteria in the mouth, improves the diversity of the oral microbiome, and then we fix the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessels. So we recouple the nitric oxide synthase enzyme, so now we've improved vascular production of nitric oxide. So that's the N101 nitric oxide lozenge. We also make a fermented beet powder where we've taken the oxalates out, the beet pulp, the beet color, the beet taste. It's a white powder. It's called NO-Beets. And then we put electrolytes in there because most Americans are deficient and are dehydrated at the cellular level. And then we put a mitochondrial, what's called peak ATP, a patented product. So if you have mitochondrial dysfunction, we actually provide ATP in this product for you. So we're providing nitric oxide, we're providing hydration, and we're providing mitochondrial ATP. And that product is a great pre-workout, an energy product that hopefully will replace things like 5-Hour Energy, the Monster energy drinks and these stimulant-ridden energy products. Why not get a natural energy source? And then I created an entire line of products for skincare. We make a topical nitric oxide for fine lines and wrinkles. And it's a dual chamber nitric oxide activating serum. You put these 2 components together and they generate NO gas, diffuses into the skin. We improve collagen deposition, improve hydration. Fine lines and wrinkles disappear. Tone, texture, and clarity of the skin improve. I think we've got 5 placebo or randomized clinical trials published on the serum. It's a remarkable product for skincare. In fact, it's a new category in skincare. Because as you know, most skincare products are designed to hide or mask the fine lines and wrinkles or the blemishes and the age spots. We get to the root cause of aging skin, which is typically lack of circulation or blood flow.
Amazing. Everybody look for those products at Accelerated Health Products soon, because that is something I'm going to try. You just got all of the women's attention in the last 30 seconds.
That's right.
I can tell you I will be trying that myself. I want to just touch on, so those supplements, eliminating processed foods, eliminating the alcohol, eliminating obviously smoking, but really thinking about what food you're feeding your body, increasing that ATP. What do you do to increase ATP? You take your Acceleradine iodine, you exercise. And I have to mention that every day when I take my dogs for a walk in the sun and I'm exhausted, my energy comes back. And there's obviously a reason. And when I do the red light therapy or infrared sauna, my energy is boosted. Because all of these things are detoxing, they're increasing the ATP. And you mentioned fluoride a few times. Obviously, my family's off of fluoride toothpaste, but fluoride will fill those receptor sites if you're iodine deficient.
Yeah, that's
right. So it's a 1-2 bam. I mean, there's so many things that fluoride is causing issue and degradation in the body, in the brain, causing brain fog and so many other things. So another reason you want to be doing supplementing with iodine. But we've got just a few minutes left, Dr. Bryan. What have we not covered? Because there's so much here.
Well, we're advancing our technology into FDA clinical trials and hopefully drugs on the market here in the next couple of years. My objective from day one was to bring safe and effective nitric oxide products to the market in every major category around the world. We've done it in nutrition, dietary supplements. We've done it in skincare. We've got a drug company called Bryan Therapeutics where we're developing this technology into clinical trials and to prescription drugs. So I think once we get this as a medicine where physicians can prescribe it for their patients, I think it's going to be the way we treat patients for the next 100 years. I think what we've done in the supplement space and giving consumers complete unrestricted access to our technology is a major win. But I think in order for this to be accepted mainstream through allopathic Western medicine, we have to get our drugs approved on the market, go through the rigor of the safety and efficacy studies through the FDA. And I think, because there's really no clinical indication where nitric oxide wouldn't be beneficial, especially at the doses that we deliver and through the delivery mechanisms, through our lozenge, through our topical, that'll transform healthcare and change the way we treat patients for the next 100 years.
And I love what you're talking about with the research and the clinical studies, because 95% of the supplements out there are a waste of money. And that's why it's so difficult to make sure that people understand the quality of supplements from someone like me. But love what you're doing. And I'm super excited to try the supplements, try the serum, and see what changes I feel. And also the people in my family who are working out 3 to 4 hour days because of their sports, and to see if they see a difference. So I'm super excited. And where can people find you?
I send people first to my educational website. I do a monthly blog. It's drnathans.bryan.com. There's some videos on there that'll educate and inform on nitric oxide. I've got my own YouTube channel where we'll post this podcast. I do interviews, lectures, and just really try to create some practical, common sense information that you can integrate into your daily life and, improve your nitric oxide status. And, I think you make a very good point, because one of the most frustrating things I encounter, spending 25 years in basic science and developing products that actually generate nitric oxide, are companies out there selling you products that are marketed as nitric oxide but don't generate nitric oxide. And, I call these companies out because we test their products, and it could kill the entire industry of nitric oxide. Because when people say, "Oh, I tried nitric oxide, I didn't see the benefits, it didn't work for me." Well, no, you tried a product that was sold deceptively as a nitric oxide product. And so I want to avoid that, because people deserve a product that actually works as advertised. And there's so many companies out there trying to sell you nitric oxide products that not only don't work, they cannot work because they just don't understand the inherent biochemistry. So buyer beware. Don't listen to all the commercials and ads that are on TV. Those products don't work. They can't work. And so that's why what you do is so important, is building a trusted brand, and patients can come to you and know that you've done the rigor of vetting these products, and we provide products that actually produce nitric oxide.
I love it. It's all about the ATP. It's all about the mitochondrial health, right? So,
Amen.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to try the supplements, and I will definitely be giving you the feedback, because I can tell you my 3 kids don't lie to me. So if something doesn't work, they'll tell me the truth.
You can always count on kids to tell you the truth, right?
Absolutely. It's like my own little N of 5 in this household. So,
Right.
And my husband, he tells me the truth too. Yeah. He's my biggest skeptic. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us. And if you need any help with your health issues, you can contact me directly through the website, sarabantahealth.com. Happy to put together a protocol for you, and join the free group coaching on Telegram with the link below. I teach you on a daily basis with tips and tools to enhance your health, and you'll be a part of an amazing group to support you on your journey. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram under Accelerated Health Products, across over 100 channels under Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. Like I mentioned, my goal is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. Send this to your friends taking PPIs or antacids or a mouthwash or fluoride toothpaste. This message needs to get out. Join us every week, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. You can find the supplements that we've talked about soon. They will be on acceleratedhealthproducts.com, and you can use coupon WELCOME10 for 10% off site-wide. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great week.